We're sat in this Library of Military History, which the Duke of Wellington established when he set up the Institute in 1831. And one of the Duke's greatest beliefs was in that of listening to the experience of others. But he didn't only think that we should listen, he thought that we should learn from the experience of others. And that, in a way, was why he moved RUSI away from the Ministry of Defence or the Foreign and Commonwealth Office or the seat of government across the road. Because sometimes the pressures there mean that whilst you can listen, you can't always accept and take them on, discuss, debate and learn. And so one of his great beliefs was to listen to those who've experienced fighting, listen to those who've experienced fighting, particularly if they do so in a different way or experience a different character of conflict than we have seen, and learn from those. Roll them over, consider them, think about them, and understand what they might mean to recognise a future battlefield for not something with which you are familiar. And therefore, it is a huge pleasure for us to welcome back again Lieutenant General Tukur Yusuf Buratai from Nigeria, who is a man with extensive experience. But he might talk about what's on the title, which is what comes next. But the reality is that the insurgency in Nigeria has really been running since the 1980s. It's not some short-term event that has been happening recently. It only occasionally peaks the headlines or grabs column inches in British and Western European papers. It doesn't make the headlines on a day-to-day basis, but this doesn't mean that it hasn't been running for quite some time. Indeed, I mean, if you look at the recent press, then one might see that, you know, the General has had a very busy start to his time. In April, they repelled a Boko Haram attack. In May, the Nigerian Army rescued 1,000 hostages that have been held by Boko Haram. And General Buratai has not just had to deal with the military operations, but has also been dealing with criticism by his predecessor and allegations and refuting those. But the General has a wide experience on which to draw upon. He joined Nigerian Army in 1981 and has run command and appointments right the way through since that today. So he's grown up and recognised this insurgency inside his own country for what it's been. Reaching the heady heights of Director of Procurement in the Ministry of Defence in 2014, the General had to live with the legacy of those decisions that were made in 2004, 2005, 2006 in the Nigerian Army, which were all about reducing size, with a promise of bigger budgets, of recapitalisation, which failed to materialise. And in 2014, he had to see what he could do to start to overcome this. From there, he was moved swiftly on in May 2015 to the Force Commander of the Multinational Joint Task Force, with which he commanded very successfully operations against Boko Haram and other reform in the army. Indeed, you can see his hallmark on all the recent announcements in Nigeria, from the much increased plans for recruitment of the Nigerian Army, the recapitalisation, the re-equipping of capability, the acceptance and appreciation for veterans and injured soldiers, where his commanders have been going around, making a round and acknowledging them, a real break necessarily from the past. But the General is not just some strict fly-by-wire, through-the-night, linear growth of an army officer. He's a man who reads widely, who's thought more about how the Nigerian Army and Nigeria itself should deal with defence and security. He is a staunch advocate of the comprehensive approach, of understanding that security and defence cannot simply be delivered by kinetic effects, but also is shaped by the non-lethal, non-kinetic actions of the Nigerian Army and the wider government. And so the Nigerian Army has now, as its Chief of Staff, someone who is seriously equipped to deal with what comes next. And so the General will now give some remarks on that topic from the podium. Those will be off the record, and I will remind you after that, when he comes and sits down, that we're off the record. General, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Peter Roberts. You've spoken so eloquently and so glowingly in respect of my career and my person. I want to most sincerely appreciate you. You've summed up precisely what the Nigerian Army has been doing in Nigeria. And I want to welcome all of you here and to appreciate you for finding time to listen to me today. I would equally appreciate the Director, Royal United Services Institute, Dr. Karen von Hippel, for finding me worthy to be here, inviting me to this year's Land Forces Conference of the Royal United Services Institute. I will begin by appreciating the RUSI for inviting me once again to the Land Warfare Summit. I was here last year, 2017, and talked on the topic, current Nigerian Army operations and the fight against Boko Haram terrorists. Since then, the Nigerian Army has made significant strides in the efforts to completely destroy the Boko Haram terrorists from Nigerian territory. Also, some security challenges have developed in other regions that require military action. The Nigerian Army, with other security agencies, have been attending to these challenges. In order to avoid being overstretched, continuous threat analysis are being carried out so that considerable attention is given to areas where security is most likely to degenerate. Therefore, I once again feel humbled and most privileged to be here to share my thoughts and experiences, but this time on the topic, degradation of Boko Haram in northeastern Nigeria. What next for the Nigerian Army? The employment of military by sovereign states globally to conduct operations against enemy or adversary is designed to set conditions for favorable conflict resolution. The military often accomplishes the set objectives through simultaneous combination of offensive, defensive, and stability operations that set conditions for favorable conflict resolution. Nigeria has achieved significant progress in the campaign against the Boko Haram terrorists. The sect has been significantly degraded, as will be evident in the course of this lecture. Consequently, we have gradually moved from conduct of major operations to small-scale mop-up and clearance operation. I'm here in this audience with me, one of the first generals who commenced the major exercise or the major operations towards degradation of the Boko Haram terrorists. He is Major General L.O. Adeosun. Invariably, operational tempo has reduced and we are now in the stabilization phase. The Global Terrorism Index figures support the fact that activities of Boko Haram have waned in Nigeria. According to the Global Terrorism Index for the year 2016-2017, and I quote, the number of deaths recorded from terrorism globally dropped to 10% between 2016 and 2017, compared to 13% in 2015, amounting to 25,673 victims in 2017, which is the second largest decline since 2010. Nigeria is reported to have recorded the largest drop in death toll arising from terrorism in 2017. The number of terrorism victims in Nigeria was put at 3,100 in 2016 compared to 5,556 in 2015, which is 80% less than the previous years, quote and unquote. This significant drop in Boko Haram terrorist activities is due to the systematic campaign led by the Nigerian Army in conjunction with other services of the armed forces of Nigeria in coordination with other elements of national security and national power. Similarly, 75% decline of Boko Haram terrorist victims was reported in Nigeria's neighboring countries of Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, which means fewer deaths arising from terrorist activities in the Lake Chad Basin. The near annihilation of the Boko Haram terrorists has necessitated a shift in the Nigerian Army approach in the conduct of operations in the Northeast region, from adversary-centric operations to the engagement of troops on operations to reduce drivers of conflict and instability and to support social and institutional resiliencies. Building local institutional capacity is expected to counter instability by forging sustainable peace, security, and economic growth. The current operational environment in the Northeast thus entails Nigerian Army formations and units engaging in stability tasks through the conduct of missions, tasks, and activities across the range of military operations to establish conditions for long-term stability. According to Small Wars Journal, stability operations is defined as, and I quote, an overarching term encompassing various military missions, tasks, and activities to maintain or reestablish a safe and secured environment, provide essential government service, emergency infrastructure, reconstruction, and humanitarian relief, unquote. Stability operations may require offensive and defensive actions to destroy recalcitrant adversaries with the intent of defeating the stability efforts. In this vein, the Nigerian Army has been conducting series of stability operations like disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration in collaboration with the Defense Headquarters under Operation Safe Corridor and our own Operation Last Hole, which was formally flagged off by me on the 14th of June this year. The Nigerian Army has also been carrying out activities to assist in the freedom of movement of goods and services within the theater of operation, ensuring public safety as well as carrying out quick impact projects like road reconstruction and the renovation and reconstruction of schools and hospitals, among others, as part of her stability operations. The Nigerian Army stability tasks in the Northeast region are conducted in coordination with the Nigerian Navy, Nigerian Air Force, and other security agencies to maintain or reestablish a safe and secure environment in order to provide essential governmental services, emergency infrastructure, reconstruction, and humanitarian relief. The focus is on identifying, targeting, and mitigating the root causes of instability to set the conditions for long-term development by building the capacity of local institutions. Therefore, this paper will highlight strategies to better understand the progress so far made by the Nigerian Army in the campaign against the Boko Haram terrorists since my last presentation and its future plans to further entrench stability in the Northeast region. Consequently, The aim of this lecture is to examine the successes recorded in the degradation of the Boko Haram terrorists in the northeast Nigeria, with a view to highlighting the next objectives of the Nigerian Army. And to achieve that, we'll have to look at an appraisal of the current operational environment in the northeast. We'll discuss impediments to the quick stability in the northeast. Then we'll also look at the farmers' hardest conflicts. And we'll go around the world to look at the examples from Sri Lanka and Colombia in their counterinsurgency experience. Then we'll now look at the next objectives, that is the plans for the Nigerian Army in the next few years to come. Now to the current operational environment. Every operational environment changes over time, and thus no two operational environments are identical, even within the same theater of operation. The United States Unified Land Operations Manual rightly posits that because of variations in operational environments, military leaders must, and I quote, consider how evolving relevant operational or mission variables affect force employment concepts and tactical actions that contribute to the strategic purpose, unquote. The operational environment is a composite of the conditions, circumstances, and influences that affect the employment of capabilities and bear on the decisions of the commander. The Nigerian Army thus plans, prepares, and executes and assess the counterinsurgency campaign in the Northeast region by analyzing the operational environment in terms of the operational variables and mission variables. The fight against the Boko Haram terrorists in the Northeast region has continued unabatedly. Our concerted effort since 2015 has led to the near annihilation of the Boko Haram terrorists. Records from the theater, as indicated in Chart 1, shows that since January 2015 till date, about 4,609 active Boko Haram terrorist fighters have fallen casualties in action. This includes 1,087 in 2015, 1,696 in 2016, 1,210 in 2017, and so far this year, 606 over the period January to May this year. The Nigerian Army has also arrested about 4,876 Boko Haram terrorists since 2015. Arms recovered over the same period now stands at 2,045 weapons of various types and sizes, as evident from what you have on Chart 2. This includes 504 weapons recorded in 2015, 733 in 2016, 535 in 2017, and 273 over the period January to May this year. In the same vein, within the same period of 2015 to May 2018, the total quantity of ammunition of various calibers recovered from the sect is 116,714. Furthermore, the statistics highlighted in Chart 3 gives a clear picture of vehicles and motorcycles recovered from the sect. An analysis of the two charts, that's 1 and 2, is vividly explained in Chart 3, which showed that military operations have been highly effective since 2015. For example, in 2014, prior to the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, a total of 872 Boko Haram terrorists suffered casualty compared to 1,696 in the year 2016, barely about 1 year in office of the president. This gives an increase of about 100%, mainly due to the intensity and effectiveness of operations of our troops, including that of the Nigerian Air Force. Also, while 464 Boko Haram terrorists were arrested by armed troops in 2014, a total of 1,343 were arrested in 2016, showing an increase of more than 250%, which is also an indication of a more effective strategy put in place to degrade the Boko Haram terrorists. In the same vein, a comparative analysis of weapons seized, equipment losses, and troops wounded in action showed the effectiveness of the military operations from 2015 to date when compared to the period 2010 to 2014. For instance, the number of vehicles lost by troops reduced by as much as 98% between 2015 till date, from 85 vehicles to a mere 5 in 2017. This is equally an indicative of the resilience of the troops. The statistics as to the Nigerian Army's casualties in men and equipment showed steady decline over the period 2015 to date. The battle casualties declined from 740 in 2014 to less than 90 in 2017. The Nigerian Army is working hard to completely halt the casualty rates this year and beyond. However, suicide bombing indicates an increase from 37 in 2014 to 95 bombings in 2017. The United States Manual on Counterterrorism clearly stated that when the terrorists are defeated, they resort to suicide bombings and other activities to demoralize the populace. The increase in suicide bombing was a result of the Boko Haram terrorists' desperation to remain relevant as a result of the intensive military operations by the Nigerian Army troops, which drastically degraded them both in personnel and equipment. To curtail the frequent suicide bombings requires non-kinetic operations. The Nigerian Army will work with the intelligence community in order to squarely address this challenge. Consequently, the statistics in casualties of personnel and equipment of the Boko Haram terrorists indicates the extent of degradation that the Nigerian military has inflicted on the sect. From a reliable intelligence source, their strength as at 2014 was 25,000, but as at today, they are about just 1,250 strong. This definitely shows that the Boko Haram terrorists have been squarely degraded. Now, we look at projections of operations. We have a lot of areas, especially areas that are inaccessible. These were equally handling within the theater of operation. Rescue of hostages. A number of hostages have equally been rescued over the years, including some of the Chibok girls. This, I assure you, will continue to ensure that we get all the remaining abducted persons back to safety. Relocation of internally displaced persons. Relocation of internally displaced persons and refugees in the Northeast is a testament to the effectiveness of the Nigerian Army's late counterinsurgency campaigns and the level of stability already recorded since the mid-2015. Over 500,000 internally displaced persons have been relocated from Maiduguri to Gubio, Damasak, Kukawa, Baga, and other settlements in Borno State. Similar relocations of internally displaced persons and other refugees who willingly returned from neighboring countries have been conducted in Yobe and Adamawa states. It is pertinent to observe that the relocation of the internally displaced persons is carried out in accordance with internationally recognized standards of dignity, safety, and voluntariness. Relocation of internally displaced persons from camps and resettlement of refugees remain the focus of Nigerian Army stability tasks in the Northeast region. Since January 2018, over 100,000 internally displaced persons have been relocated from Maiduguri to Bama, Kawuri, Aulari, and other settlements. Nigerian Army also conceptualized and is currently conducting Operation Last Hold, designed primarily to further accomplish the relocation of internally displaced persons to their communities in northeastern Nigeria, especially the northern part of Borno State. As at 11th June this year, the total strength of internally displaced persons in the 54 internally displaced persons camps in Operation Lafia Dole Theater is 1,453,273. A detailed breakdown of the quoted figure are shown on the table on the screen. However, fresh maneuver brigades have been inducted into Borno State and deployed in Jili, Zari, Mutumbali, Malumti, Gashigar, Malamfatori, Garere, Kekeno, Marte, and Krinewa to provide security and other essential supports to internally displaced persons that were recently relocated to the affected areas. Troops have been tasked to undertake stability operations, such as employment of military equipment to clear farms and rebuild houses in order to facilitate acclimatization of returnees to their ancestral homes and the restoration of economic activities. To this end, the Borno State government and indeed the United Nations through the UNICEF and other international non-governmental organizations are fully involved in this movement. Opening of roads. We have equally undertaken appropriate steps to ensure all the roads in the Northeast are open. Commuters are using these roads and the return of economic activities fully re-established. Humanitarian support. Nigerian Army formations and units undertake humanitarian support operations designed to reduce the suffering of the victims, provide for their immediate needs, and restore their dignity. We have had to embark on feeding of internally displaced persons sometimes from the resources meant for troops and running of educational programs in the IDP camps. We have also provided the enabling environment for over 126 international humanitarian non-governmental organizations and provided escorts for their activities in unstable and inaccessible areas. The Nigerian Army has prioritized the directive of President Muhammadu Buhari to eradicate polio from Nigeria. Accordingly, troops have been trained to administer polio vaccines. Formations and units integrate troops that administer polio vaccines as part of routine patrol details to areas considered inaccessible by government health agencies. All initiatives undertaken in support of humanitarian efforts are designed to win the hearts and minds of the inhabitants of the area and win support for our counter-terrorism efforts. The Nigerian Army is working along with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation through the National Primary Health Care Agency and the Dangote Foundation to carry out these immunizations. We now look at impediments to quick stability in the Northeast region. Achieving the palpable, stable state of security experience in the Northeast Nigeria has been slow and tedious. Some factors, such as conflict of interest of some humanitarian actors, misconception of the military operations by some civil society organizations, and slow pace of reconstruction efforts have served as impediments to the achievement of the desired quick stability. There are indeed other factors which time may not allow us to discuss further here. But the major ones are these three, starting with conflict of interest of humanitarian organizations. Activities of humanitarian support actors in a theater of conflict are projected to provide essential services to victims and facilitate restoration of stability. Due to the neutral stand of humanitarian actors in the Northeast region, their activities have rather helped to provide critical resources to some of the terrorists. A review of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance products has shown that some humanitarian actors discreetly visit Boko Haram terrorist camps and provide medical and other essential support to the terrorists. This principle of neutrality by humanitarian organizations in the Northeast theater is a welcome development. However, it has led to some conflict of interest that is a clog in the wheels of progress to Nigerian Army's operations. The actions of these humanitarian organizations end up emboldening the insurgents to perpetrate carnage on some targets in the theater. This has led to gross human rights abuses by the Boko Haram terrorist sects. The Nigerian Army campaigns plan in the Northeast is designed to deny Boko Haram terrorists access to critical supplies in a bid to deter attacks on soft targets, including government forces. The discreet support to Boko Haram terrorists, though not intended by some humanitarian actors, could thus be abused for the protracted nature of the conflict and indeed added to their resilience and the tortuous journey to achieve the desired stability. Nigerian Army troops have been restrained from bringing kinetic force to bear on humanitarian actors observed in the Boko Haram terrorist camps out of the desire to avoid collateral damage and negative publicity by the ever-critical local and indeed international media, including some of the international organizations. Now, misconception of military operations by civil society organizations. The civil society organizations have constantly made unfounded allegations on the conduct of Nigerian Army troops in the Northeast theater. Amnesty International and some other groups are at the forefront of constantly leveling accusations of sexual exploitation of civilian victims of insurgency, extrajudicial killings, and other vices against troops. I believe no any organization will love our brothers and sisters more than ourselves. I will only agree that Amnesty International loves our sisters more than us if they agree to marry them. Investigations carried out on all the allegations reported to Nigerian Army authorities so far have proven to be contrary to what was alleged. Continuous leveling of unfounded allegations by civil society actors against the troops has remained a big distraction in the performance of the much-desired stability task in the Northeast region. Nigerian Army has made concessions to civil society groups to vet its activities in the Northeast region. However, every concession made has resulted in the call for more concessions by civil society actors. Nigerian Army has thus continued to crave the understanding of civil society organizations to place issues in perspective in making allegations against the troops in the Northeast. This is done based on the understanding that civil society actors are important stakeholders to the accomplishment of stability in a conflict zone. The Nigerian Army rules of engagement conforms to international best practices and primarily set to respect and protect human rights. Now, slow pace of reconstruction efforts. Reconstruction capacity impacts directly on the achievement of stability in a conflict zone. The RAN Counterinsurgency Study Group posits that, and I quote, "The quicker a government is in providing services to the population, the greater is the ability to undermine popular support for insurgents, and more likely the propensity to defeat insurgency. Governance, therefore, involves the provision of essential services to the population by a legitimate authority in a timely manner. The Northeast region is one of the least developed parts of Nigeria over the years, and most of the villages are not accessible. Some of the inhabitants have never felt the impact of governance, as there are no basic social amenities such as roads, water, electricity, hospitals, and schools. This situation is compounded by the destruction of most of the available infrastructure by the Boko Haram terrorist group. Living condition is so difficult in parts of the theater, thus discouraging quick return of internally displaced persons to their communities long after Nigerian Army troops have liberated their areas. Return of government agencies such as health care providers to areas liberated by the military is also slow, leading to reluctance by the populace to return back. The federal government of Nigeria has initiated some reconstruction initiatives, such as the Presidential Initiative for the Northeast. However, reconstruction efforts through the Commission, through the initiative and other initiatives, has not kept pace with the liberation efforts of the military. Reconstruction effort is anticipated to pick pace in the Northeast with the provision of needed funding for the Northeast Development Commission, recently signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari. Furthermore, state governments in the region are collaborating with the Northeast Development Commission and have started rebuilding schools, burnt down houses, and providing agricultural items like fertilizers to encourage IDPs to return to their homes. The effective management of funds by the Commission will translate to quicker resettlement, rehabilitation and integration, and indeed reconstruction of roads, houses, and business premises of victims of insurgency in the Northeast, and bring about an enduring stability in the region. Now we look at the farmers-herders conflict. In Nigeria, conflict between farmers and herders gained traction in 1999, but became a serious concern by 2010. It caused about 80 deaths between 2010 and 2013. Clashes between the two parties are largely rooted in disputes over land, as well as the rising number of livestock and encroachment on grazing lands, which has increased the risk of conflict. In 2014, there were over 200 reported incidents of pastoralist and farmers' conflict, which resulted in about 1,300 deaths, thousands of people displaced, destruction of properties and farmlands, as well as loss of cattle. In 2015, about 850 farmers-herders attacks were recorded, with additional 5,000 deaths and about 62,000 persons displaced. Incidents subsequently declined, with death toll falling to 2,500 between January 2016 and December 2017. The death of about 160 in January this year sparked public outcry, which led to the approval for the Nigerian Army to undertake exercise I Am Apatuma in February this year. To curb the incidents, so far, 368 deaths have been recorded between February and May 2018. This further heightened state of insecurity in affected states, notably Kaduna, Benue, Plateau, Nasarawa, Katsina, Taraba, and Zamfara states, among others. These clashes, besides displacement of communities, loss of lives, property, struck animals, and destruction of farmlands, it has increased the proliferation of illicit weapons, with attendant breakdown of law and order in areas where such clashes occur. However, some of the clashes have political connotations. The federal government of Nigeria has adopted measures over the years to stem the tide of farmers-herders clashes. Some major initiatives include ranching of animals, designation of grazing reserves, and remapping of grazing routes for herdsmen. Also, the nomadic schools project was also established. The federal government has also budgeted huge sums of money for the Great Green Wall program, aimed at combating desertification, that is a major factor that drives pastoralists southwards in search of grazing areas. Despite these efforts, the conflicts have continued unabated, as most of the grazing reserves are either not utilized or are not suitable for use by the pastoralists, as farmers have encroached upon some of them. In April 2018, the Coalition on Conflict Resolution and Human Rights in Nigeria released a complete review of incidents of farmers-herders crisis, lauding the professional conduct of the Nigerian Army as patriotic. Therefore, the persistent clashes between both parties and the unintended consequences of wanton destruction of properties and loss of lives undermine internal security in the country. The Nigerian Army is re-strategizing to effectively deal with the farmers-herders conflict. Now, example of the Sri Lanka and Colombian stabilization activities. I will take this briefly. The Roman Empire in Germania, the French in Algeria, the United States in Vietnam, and the Soviet Union in Afghanistan all created the myth that insurgencies cannot be defeated. In recent years, this notion has only been reinforced by NATO's slow progress against the Taliban. However, recent experiences from Sri Lanka and Colombia have proven that counterinsurgency strategies can, and in fact, succeed. The Sri Lankan and Colombian governments' efforts to encourage democratic governance, even in insurgency-controlled areas, foster international participation, and addressing the root causes of insurgency largely helped to defeat the Tamil Tigers and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, respectively. These measures offer lessons for an effective, replicable counterinsurgency strategy in future conflicts and have been imbibed by the Nigerian Army in its campaign against the Boko Haram terrorists. Now we look at the root causes of insurgency. The surest path to stability following counterinsurgency campaign is to address the root causes of insurgency, such as poverty and lack of rural development. The level of stability witnessed so far in Sri Lanka and Colombia at the end of campaign against insurgents could be attributed to efforts made to address the root causes of insurgency in these countries. The Nigerian Army, as an instrument of authority of the federal government of Nigeria, will engage in activities to address some of the root causes of Boko Haram insurgency by engaging in rebuilding physical infrastructure in the Northeast region. Additionally, troops will assist the populace in the affected areas to clear their farmlands for agriculture as a means of addressing poverty. This, of course, will be done in full support of both the state and indeed the federal government of Nigeria. Now to the crux of the matter. What next for the Nigerian Army in the Northeast? Look at the future perspective after the degradation of the Boko Haram terrorists. Permit me at this stage to highlight the next objectives of the Nigerian Army in the Northeast region after the degradation of Boko Haram terrorists. These objectives are hinged on the three pillars of presence, readiness, and partnership. Stability tasks that will be undertaken by formations and units will flow from the federal government of Nigeria's policy and strategic guidance. My directives as the Chief of Army Staff and the theater campaign plan. The objectives include maintaining a credible presence in the Northeast region and ensuring open and free navigation on the Lake Chad. Other objectives are deterring the establishment of Boko Haram terrorist camps and countering the smuggling of illicit small arms and light weapons across the borders. Accomplishment of these tasks and objectives will be based on certain assumptions. Some assumptions represent an assessment and predictive analysis of the future course of events of the Nigerian Army in the Northeast. These assumptions include the belief that the Nigerian Army will continue to receive government support to retain or have available at least the current level of force presence and posture in the immediate term. Both will remain essential to stability in the Northeast. It is also assumed that the multinational Joint Task Force framework will further enhance stability and security in the Lake Chad Basin and will continue to receive commitment of resources from member nations. Furthermore, it is expected that the support from foreign-friendly partner nations will remain strong to promote increased sub-regional security. These assumptions are paramount to the accomplishment of future objectives of the Nigerian Army in the Northeast region, as initiated as follows. 1. Maintain a credible presence. The Nigerian Army will maintain formations and units in key strategic locations throughout the Northeast region. These deployments will continue to demonstrate the federal government of Nigeria's resolve to promote stability in the Northeast. Formations and units will be compact, well-equipped, and highly mobile, and the troops will be engaged on national and multinational operations with neighboring countries under the auspices of the multinational Joint Task Force in order to foster improved defense relations in the Lake Chad Basin. Our key partners, the United States of America, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, and indeed others, will continue to provide the close collaboration and support to the Nigerian Army in training, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and logistics support. Continued deployment of troops across strategic locations will deny Boko Haram terrorists freedom of action. This will also facilitate the establishment of civil administration in all deliberated local government areas in the Lake Chad Basin. Such deployments will serve as springboards for deployment of civil police and other security agencies to take off liberated areas. Accordingly, the level of Nigerian Army troops deployed in the Northeast region will be reviewed as the security situation improves and better stability is achieved. This is more expedient to relieve troops of battle fatigues. Now, ensure open and free navigation on the Lake Chad. Inhabitants of the Lake Chad Basin, especially those recently resettled through Nigerian Army efforts, require freedom of action across the lake and strategic access to the wider Sahel and the Central African sub-region to advance their economic interests. The Lake Chad Basin is vital for fishing, farming, and transportation of goods and services. Accordingly, the Nigerian Army, under the auspices of Operation Last Hole, has deployed sizable quantity of gunboats and patrol crafts in Baga to foster unhindered access to the Lake Chad waters in order to ensure the free flow of resources vital to the regional economy. The Nigerian Army amphibious troops have been engaged in and will continue to undertake the clearance of weeds and other obstructions that could impede the movement of boats on the waters of the Lake Chad. The clearance of Lake Chad is necessary to make the lake navigable, as Boko Haram terrorists have held sway in the area until recently, and little navigation has been undertaken in the general area in the past 5 years. The multinational Joint Task Force conduct of Operation Amnifacat in the Lake Chad Basin area is part of the efforts to make the area safe for return of economic activities. Troops will conduct riverine patrol to encourage farming, fishing, and other economic activities by the local populace. Now, deter re-establishment of Boko Haram camps. Deterring the re-establishment of Boko Haram camps in the Northeast region is pivotal to enhancing security and ensuring long-term stability. This requires Nigerian Army to dissuade Boko Haram terrorists from taking actions to re-establish camps by making its leaders understand that Either the cost of the action is too great, is of no use, or unnecessary. Deterrence posture of the Nigerian Army in the Northeast region will be based upon credibility, the ability to prevent attack by Boko Haram terrorists, respond decisively to any attack so as to discourage even contemplating an attack upon us, and strike accurately when necessary. It is in line with this thinking that the Nigerian Army commenced Operation Last Hold in the Northeast Theater. The operation is to achieve three objectives: to further degrade the Boko Haram terrorists, especially the faction domiciled in the Lake Chad area, to facilitate the return of internally displaced persons to their communities, and to promote civil-military relations with the conduct of population influence activities. The core Sambisa forest will be permanently occupied by troops in furtherance of the Nigerian Army's deterrence posture in the Northeast region. The Nigerian Army engineers is currently engaged in construction of access roads into Sambisa forest from two fronts. Accordingly, access roads are being constructed from Bita and Tokumbere to open up Jure, Alafa, Jimia, Kamzero, and other settlements inside the Sambisa forest. The access roads will serve as main supply routes for the sustenance of troops deployed in Sambisa forest. Additionally, the entire Sambisa forest will serve as Nigerian Army's training area and will host activities such as Nigerian Army Small Arms Championship, similar to that which was conducted in April last year. Now we look at counter-smuggling of illicit arms and light weapons. The vast arid Sahel region that connects countries like Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Algeria, and Chad is a conduit for supply of weapons to the Boko Haram terrorists. According to the United Nations Regional Center for Peace and Disarmament in Africa, and I quote, 70% of over 350 million illicit small arms and light weapons circulating in West Africa are domiciled in Nigeria, unquote. Availability of this large cache of illicit weapons has remained the driver of the Boko Haram insurgency in the Northeast region, as well as other forms of insecurity recorded across Nigeria. The porous borders connecting Nigeria with Cameroon, Chad, and Niger Republic have been exploited by the Boko Haram terrorists to smuggle weapons and other logistics into the country. It is thus expedient for Nigerian Army formations and units to work in conjunction with forces of the countries of the Lake Chad Basin Commission to patrol the extensive borders and forestall smuggling activities. This will translate to enduring stability in the Northeast region. My Honorable Chairman, Professor Peter Roberts, gentlemen and ladies, in conclusion, I have in the last few minutes presented an overview of the Nigerian Army campaign plan to ensure stability across the Northeast region following the degrading of the Boko Haram terrorists. My submission, which is framed from my perspective as the Chief of Army Staff, Nigerian Army, covered the nature of the current operational environment, some impediments against quick achievement of stability in the region, such as conflict of interest of humanitarian organizations, misconception of Nigerian Army operations by the civil society groups, and slow pace of reconstruction efforts were highlighted. I also discussed the recent security challenges of the farmers, herders clashes, and ways they could be mitigated. I have also presented the numerous successes the Nigerian Army recorded against the Boko Haram terrorists. Finally, I discussed what next, which are the future objectives of Nigerian Army campaign in the Northeast as we move forward. It is my sincere conviction and hope that useful lessons can be drawn from our experiences, and it will also serve as a model for decimating insurgencies in Africa and indeed globally. Once more, it is my singular honor and privilege to have been part of the Royal United Services Institute Land Warfare Summit 2018. I use this opportunity to once again thank the organizers for inviting me to give this talk. Thank you and God bless.
General, I think you presented an amazing array of challenges and threats. I mean, three things that struck me. First is the scale with which you have to see things. Not simply the ground. Yeah, please come and have a seat. Not simply the size of your country and the scale with which you have to do it, but also the size of the population which you're dealing. Not just that, but the scale of the displaced person challenge that you face. I mean, this is something almost unimaginable in European terms, to just deal with something of that scale, as well as the threats and the driving forces behind it. Plus, then, of course, you have the arms, that sit within the region. The second factor that got me was the roles that you're undertaking. I mean, not simply those security roles from the war fighting, the counterinsurgency, moving into the sort of DDR roles as we military know them, that disarmament role, which is not simple. But then you also have these mandates to eradicate polio, to rebuild infrastructure, to rebuild roads, to connect people, to do farming assistance, things you didn't mention, like support and security to ongoing elections. I mean, this is a huge array of tasks which I don't think many European military leaders could really get their hands around. The third point that came across to me really strongly was the fact that you didn't major on technology as the solution. There was a great feeling from you that it was a human endeavour, that this was reliant on your troops, on the individuals, on cross-government support, on the population, as a network to put it together, a network of people, not of things. And I think to me that was hugely refreshing, that acceptance that security is a human task. It is not a technology one. And whilst you can call on ISR and full motion video and photographic reconnaissance and phone records from lots of people, actually it's about the human endeavour at the end of it which sits at the base. It was a huge speech, but I now need to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we are off the record.